Detective Comics 1052. Mariko Tamaki writing with Max Rayner on the art. Next part of the Tower storyline. And we kind of see another perspective of the event that happened towards the end of last issue, which is kind of Murdy and Chasey's perspective of the outbreak and then everyone going to sleep from Psycho Pirate. With a bit more context to her and some more investigation stuff from the Bat Girls and Batwoman on the outside. So that's the main gist of the story in this one. How did you feel about this chapter?
It's another solid chapter. I did feel the pacing a little bit on this one again. I think with probably about half the issue, kind of recovering events from where we were up to last time. Obviously, it does go beyond that, and this does have the extra perspective of being from Chase. So I'm not saying it's completely without merit, but I definitely felt like half of this book, give or take, is kind of where we were up to last week already, and I was wanting a little bit more advancement.
I mean, I'd probably agree this might be one of the least like fulfilling issues, I suppose. I mean, and that sounds even more negative than I want it to. I just mean it's maybe on the lower end of the issues so far in the story, just purely because it does, like you say, not necessarily go past too much where we were last week. But I do actually really like the idea of getting the perspective of exactly how both Chase and Huntress both like kind of reacted during this, and how Huntress like snaps into action immediately because she's back to being herself because all the controllings went away.
We kind of saw that last week though, right?
We saw parts of it, but I mean, this is like we see the moment like she like wakes up here, right? You know, because she's in talking to Chase, and she immediately just snaps into Huntress mode and goes to like try and like you know, find Dick or like call Nightwing or whoever, and like she says, you know, call Dr. Fro, like tell her what's going on. So there is kind of like this seed that's planted that sort of leaks out into the Bat family, that so they get like a hint that something went down. Because the official story is there was a gas leak, they say, and like Oracle's like checked and it's like, no, there was no gas leak, there's nothing like that going on. But I think the panic of seeing Tracy's perspective, like her trying to dial the phone and like being terrified as all this fighting's going on outside, is pretty good. It's one of those things though where, you know, it is half the book until we're kind of past the same thing we ended with last time, and it actually took me a minute to realize, we're doing the same event. You know, we're doing this is the same one from the end of last issue. It's because at first I was like, is this happening again the next morning? It feels like this is a bit weird. I was like, oh no, this makes more sense. It's the same one.
Yes, and it's not that it's without merit, because there is, you know, a new angle that it's telling here. It's just I wanted a little bit more out of it, I think, by the end.
I think Joe, honestly, Joe, I think it probably is. I think the two places where it feels a little excessive is probably one that there's kind of like a little flashback to Meridian at the start, talking about encountering Batman, and then also that we go through all the steps of like Psycho Pirate, like sort of putting everyone to sleep again. I think those are the two things. Like, I think if it was just like 4 pages showing you Meridian's side of this, where she's in the office and it all kicks off, and then she's scared on the phone, I think all that stuff's super valid, and all that stuff feels, you know, essential to what you're sort of building with the story and the all the building and all that. But it's those extra elements that maybe it is just a case of okay, this is 12 issues, they've mapped out the story, and the chunk that's mapped out for this part was just a little bit shorter than it needed to be, and
it makes me wonder, and I don't mean to sound like really harsh here, because this will probably sound harsher than I mean it. Is this 12 issues because they had a 12-issue story and this is the 12 chunks? Or is it because that's a nice round 3 months of comics that we can have weekly, and now we need to... Maybe we had a 10-issue story that we're going to stretch out into 12.
I mean, I think... I don't think it's binary. I think there's maybe an argument here where it's like, okay, I've got an outline for this story and it's about this many issues, right? Mm-hmm. And they go, okay, well, you know, he said it's about 11, make it 12, you know, like, and it's like, okay, so maybe a little padding there, a little bit more extra atmosphere here or there just to sort of get up to that number or something like that. But it also could be a thing where maybe one of the ideas, like, oh, this doesn't quite work. Oh, so all of a sudden, like, there's maybe like a third of an issue that doesn't quite have something there. So, oh well, I'll expand on this a little bit then, and sometimes that'll work well, and sometimes you'll feel like it is maybe stretching things a little bit. But but like I say, like most of like the meat of what's in this other side of this event is actually quite good, and I really like what it adds to the just how scared she is. The idea that this information gets out to Batwoman, and the fact that she makes this phone call is relevant because Dr. Ware's monitoring the work phones and he hears it all and like fires quote unquote Dr. Fro immediately. So like there's definitely advancement here, and then them looking into like some of the people who have gone missing, and I really like the page of like this extra phone call she makes to Dr. Fro where she doesn't sound quite right. And then we see her, because she's like, oh, I'm so sorry I made that phone call. I was overreacting. And then we see, like, Psycho Pirate and Ware right behind her. And he's like, you feel shame. You feel shameful.
I really like that bottom panel of that where he's just going, shame.
Yes.
And it's, the close up on her eye.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. Like, all that stuff is really great. And the idea that, because we know that, like, they've worked their magic on Nakano because Chase is complaining early on. Nakano's, like, starting to go ahead with things without her finishing a report. But then here you see they're now using it on her as well. So, yeah. And then the other little touch that I did like, the one thing I did like them adding to the other Psycho Pirate stuff is Dr. Ware realizing that he also got put to sleep. And he's like, wait, did you do it to me as well, you prick? And he's like, look, I had to quickly just knock everyone out. Like,
I was in a rush.
It's complex. It's hard to like specify who it's affected and not. So, no, I liked all that stuff. So the Bat Ladies are looking into the stuff that's gone missing, some of the people that's involved, and some of these, quote unquote movies, right? So they establish in this, they sort of clarify that a lot of these criminals are seeing their violent pasts, they're remembering them as movies when they weren't really movies, and that's kind of
got a hint of in earlier issues.
Yeah, we were kind of speculating on that a little bit because they kept bringing up movies a lot. And it leads to them figuring out that maybe there's something going on in the underground city. That's where the base of this gang is. And sure enough, Batwoman, Cass, and Steph go down and beat the crap out of them and find all the supplies. So, I enjoyed. It was fun seeing them in action. Finally getting to do something, be proactive. That's kind of neat. Back at the tower, we see Huntress being kind of confused and not really understanding why her hands are bloody, what went on. She's getting like flashes of like moments of her fighting on the before she get knocked out, and she starts chatting to Anna Volshin, who's also talking about like these movies that they're remembering, that there's something not quite right. And we know that Huntress, before they get knocked out, was sort of racing to try and find Dick or try and like find something to leave a message. And the final page here at the end of the story is that she wrote in blood under her bed, his hold is breaking. So again, you got this idea that everything's like slowly just leading towards disaster, like everything's breaking down, and this thing that's happened is going to happen again. It's going to be worse next time, and so on and so on. So
obviously we've seen how much worse it gets.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is cracking at the seams, and this is the halfway point now, right? So
yeah,
it's presumably about to start kicking off in the next couple of issues.
Yeah, so I still like everything the story's generally doing. It's just that thing where there's maybe a third of this issue that feels like it's maybe padding out the story a touch, but I generally liked everything else it was doing in the story, and I agree. And I love the all the Bat Ladies getting to be like the focus of the heroes here. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, Nightwing's not really knocking around much this issue.
No, you see him in there, during the fighting, during the riot, but that's pretty much it. And even having Batwoman with the Batgirls just feels different. It's like, oh, this is kind of nice. And then Huntress being a vital part of it as well on the inside. It does kind of feel like a celebration of a lot of Bat family members who don't necessarily always get that much attention, and yeah, that's good.
It's kind of nice to use when they use detective for that stuff.
Yeah, that is. So I had a good time. The story, the art. I mentioned the Psycho Pirate page. That's really good. He looks really ominous as he's saying shame and all that. Typically liked all the stuff with the fighting with the Batgirls and Batwoman. Plus the setting of the underground city is kind of nice as well. Kind of like the vibe of that down there. Yeah. Yeah.
The only part of the art I wasn't massively keen on, and for that I really do like a lot of it, especially that Psycho Pirate stuff. Is the opening flashback with Meridian. I get that it's maybe trying to a slightly different style to evoke that it's a different time period.
Yeah.
adjust on it lands quite as well as the rest of the book.
Yeah, Meridian, who has a bomb strapped to her hand because the Joker's pissed that she's been giving Harley therapy. This is back in the early days. Or
yeah,
that's what it sounded like anyway. Because she mentions that some psycho's girlfriend is now getting therapy from her.
And then broke up with him.
Yeah, so I suspect that's Harley and Joker. I mean, I could be wrong, but that was the first.
It's definitely the implication, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and the backup, which has been ongoing here, is you've got the ginger kid. He's with Elliot in an ice cream shop, and in walks Jason Todd, doing some sort of casual reconnaissance, talking to them and finding out that they're working for Penguin. And that's Elliot's like, yeah, we kill people for Penguin. It pays great, and all the rest of it. And he informs Bruce later at dinner that Penguin's paying kids to murder for him, and Bruce is like, I've not heard any of this. And we know it's not true, because the rest of the conversation with the kids is like, wait, why did you lie to him? He's like, because reputation matters, man, on the streets. People are going to believe the worst.
Basically, Jason's a gullible little shit.
Yes. I think what I liked about this is Bruce says, I'm going to go check it out. And then we see like Matches Malone at the Iceberg Lounge. I'm like, there you go. That's really nice.
Yeah.
I kind of love that we don't focus on that, though. It's just, it establishes that he's there looking into it because he would be, but he's not the focus of the story. The kid is. So we stick with him. And then Elliot tries to convince the ginger kid to go in and help steal from Penguin, which we know Penguin's one rule, really, was, don't steal from Penguin.
It's a good rule.
And they're in snooping around. He doesn't really want to do it, but then they kind of get caught in there because Penguin comes running in because Batman's in the Iceberg Lounge.
And he'd picked up his gun because why not? So now he looks extra guilty. Yeah,
he looks really suspicious and guilty. And they set up that there's like a sort of like a trap in here where if you hit a button, like all these cages will come down. It's like a security system. So Batman comes swooping in, and the kid hits the button, locking Penguin with the Batman. And Penguin's like, why did you do it? Because part of me was thinking the kid was going to somehow earn Penguin's trust because Penguin has been relatively nice to him. But instead, he makes the choice to leave him with Batman and just leave in fear.
Because clearly he's a sociopath and probably, has some problems.
But then he runs into Jason, and Jason disarms him. And what's interesting here is he says that he recognizes him. He's seen him before, and Jason obviously thinks, oh, he may be recognizing me from the diner, from the ice cream place. And what he actually means, though, because he mentions it on the next page, is that he's seen Robin before, but it was a different kid. Now it's a younger guy. And obviously, this is like, oh, so in his time in Arkham, when he broke out, some time had passed. Clearly, we've switched now to Jason from Dick. So it's interesting to sort of track this with a bit of the timeline and sort of see where we are.
Him in the back of the police car yelling that Batman's making an army of boys is kind of funny, but also kind of sad.
It's funny, it's sad. It also ties in nicely to what Scarecrow was doing effectively earlier in the story, which is kind of nice. But
you have to think maybe the lingering effects of that extreme dose is kind of going to play this up for him.
Yeah, even just this idea that this is his stance, though, is that he's scared of Batman. He sees Batman as villainous, and that he sees Batman as recruiting boys. And hell, even Penguin is doing that. Him and Elliot are been recruited by Penguin for kind of similar. I mean, it's presented in a more normal way because they're being hired in a sort of an employment role.
Child labor is cheap.
Yes, exactly. But instead, it's very like him yelling that.
The real reason Penguin does it, right?
So they're smaller than him? I don't know.
Yes, yes, exactly. It's the only way he has employees that he can tower over.
But I do think that last line's quite prominent, and it really sets up his viewpoint and the idea that he sees Batman as this villain who's doing this horrible thing. It makes me just interested to see where this character's going. And as much as he is a bit unhinged, as much as he has some problems, ultimately I can kind of see why he sees this particular detail this way. And that it's unhealthy that Batman's training, multiple young boys. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see where it goes. And Blanco's art is obviously still very good. A lot of this stuff at the end takes place in the red, which contrasts nicely with the dark, muted blues and greens of Penguin's office from before. So it's a nice contrast.
I feel a little bad for Rayner because his art on the main story is solid, for the most part. So it's good.
Mm.
And then you just get to this stuff with Blanco, and it just It's like it steals the issue, doesn't it, in terms of just the visual style.
But I mean, the fact that there's only 8 pages per issue is why he's able to do this consistently.
Oh, yeah,
And even then, I'm sure he got ahead a little bit because that's still more than a full comic per month.
Yes.
So, but no, solid stuff. I'm still intrigued with where the story's going with the kid. It's done a really good job of making it intriguing and making me kind of see, okay, where does this fit into the Gotham mythos and the Batman mythos? Like, I'm curious. So, no, cool. All right, what you rating the main story?
I'll give the main story a generous 7.
Okay. And backup?
That's an 8 for sure.
I'm also going to go with a 7 for the main story. I wouldn't call it a generous 7. I'd say it's just a nice 7. But still digging the story overall. And then backup, I'd probably say just a nice solid 8.